wrote a letter to churches to make that clear.
I'm glad everyone agreed.
Yes, all of them did agree. But Jews from Asia Minor followed Paul wherever he went, hoping to harm him. Also, within churches, the Judaizers changed the good news Paul preached into something that was not good news at all.
Father, what is meant by Judaizer?
Well, in our final storytelling about Paul, I will answer that and other questions. Now, it is definitely bedtime, and we must leave the story tree until later.
The Bible for Children series is a John Ehrig production. You may reach him for questions and comments at www.africanpathways.org. This is the Bible for Children series. A father gathers and sits with his children outside their home to tell them stories from God's Word.
Children, let us go to the story tree and learn more about Daniel and his friends during their captivity in Babylon. Remember, God gave Daniel the ability to interpret dreams. King Nebuchadnezzar was tired of his wise men giving false meanings when he told them about his dreams. So he decided they must tell him what he dreamt and then give the meaning. They couldn't do this, even though their lives depended on it. But with God's help, Daniel described the king's dream and told him what it meant. The king rewarded Daniel and his friends with high positions in his kingdom. But then the king decided to build a huge statue of gold, 28 meters high and 3 meters wide. The people under his rule were ordered by decree to worship the statue in the likeness of Nebuchadnezzar when they heard certain music played. Anyone failing to worship would be burned alive in a massive furnace.
Oh, my. So what happened to Daniel and his 3 friends?
The king's astrologers, wise men, and other advisors were jealous of the high position of Daniel and his friends. They approached the king and said,
"Those Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, only worship their own God and refuse to bow to the statue. They also will not serve your God."
The king became violently angry, so much so that his face became twisted with anger.
"Bring me those 3 now."
When they arrived, he said,
"Is it true? Do you refuse to worship the gold statue, my statue, of which I demanded worship? I give you one more chance to obey. If your king refuses, I will throw you in my furnace, and your God or any God will not be able to spare you. I am waiting for your answer."
They answered with assurance.
If we are thrown in the burning furnace, we know that God whom we serve is able to save us. He will save us from your power. But even if he does not, we will never serve your God or worship at the feet of the gold statue.
Nebuchadnezzar came into a rage. His face, the mask of death.
"Of all the insults to the king!"
Will they die? How horrible.
Dear child of mine, this is the Lord God Almighty we're talking about, working for the faithful. He is a God that loves his children. Be patient. The king ordered the 3 to be thrown into the furnace, heated to many times normal temperature. The 3 were bound tight by the strongest men in the Babylonian army. But the heat was so great, once the soldiers tossed the 3 in the flames, they died instantly. The king watched for a time and then got as close as he dared.
"Did we not have those 3 in the furnace, tied and bound? I see 4 men inside. They are walking around. The 4th looks like a god."
After a while, he called them by name.
"Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here."
They approached the king, and he and all the members of the royal court could not see a single singed hair on their heads. They were not burned at all. King Nebuchadnezzar was forced to praise their God, our God. He realized an angel had come to save them. The king made another decree.
"If my people, no matter whom, speak a word against the God of those 3 young men, they will be torn limb from limb. Their homes will be made rubble. These men would rather die than serve or worship any but their God.
Then the king promoted the 3 Jewish men to even higher positions in Babylon. The 3 kept the faith of the one and only true God.
But what about Daniel himself? Did everything work out well for him?
Yes, well, during the time of Nebuchadnezzar, but not when King Darius took his place. At first, Daniel had great power. He, with 2 other men, were over the 120 regional officials ruling the kingdom. Daniel did so well, Darius intended to place him over the entire kingdom. His rivals did not want that to happen, but couldn't find any fault in him that would bring him down. They determined his one weakness was unwavering devotion to his God. They came up with a plan. They went to the king as a group and said,
King Darius, live forever. We all want you to make a law requiring everyone to pray to no god or man except you for the next 30 days. Anyone who disobeys your law will be thrown into a den of lions. Make it the kind of law that cannot be repealed.
King Darius did as they asked and put the law into writing. Daniel's enemies then went as a group to witness Daniel praying 3 times a day from his upstairs window, as he always did. They hurried to the king to tell him Daniel paid no attention to his law. Unlike Nebuchadnezzar, Darius was not angry with Daniel. He was greatly distressed and wanted to help Daniel. But his law could not be repealed. He regretfully allowed Daniel's enemies to throw him into the lion's den. Darius said to Daniel,
May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you.
The king went to his palace, but could not eat or sleep that night. At the first light of day, he went to the lion's den and said,
Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?
Daniel replied, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. The king commanded the men who accused Daniel to be put to death. He issued a decree to all people in his land, in all languages, that they must fear and worship the God of Daniel. So Daniel prospered in the time of King Darius and the next king, Cyrus.
So even when his nation lost and he became a captive, his devotion to God was rewarded?
Yes, that is the point of the lesson. It was true of Daniel's 3 friends and Daniel himself. We must dare to be Daniels and stand up for what we believe. Now, off to bed. Say your prayers and thank God for the day and the blessings he gives. I love you all. And so God.
The Bible for Children series is a John Erie production. You may reach him for questions and comments at www.africanpathways.org.
Stories from Jesus, told in love. Those in the crowd and their reasons for being there differed greatly. His disciples wanted to learn. Tax collectors and sinners wanted redemption. Pharisees and teachers of the law were looking for reasons to condemn him for things such as associating with tax collectors and sinners. To this varied crowd, Jesus often spoke in parables. In Luke chapters 15 and 16, all the groups we just described are mentioned as being in the crowd. These chapters contain 5 parables, the last of which is the rich man and Lazarus, our featured parable for today. Jesus opens. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores. Jesus continues to tell the story and explains the rich man lived a life of ease, lacking nothing. He dressed in purple and was draped in fine linens, a sign in those days of royalty and high position. He feasted daily. But then There was raggedy old Lazarus at his palace door. He had to be carried to the area by others in order to beg. The rich man may have thought, my friends in high places will see him at my palace entrance. What kind of an impression will that leave? He may also have thought that the beggar obviously had done something evil himself, or maybe some ancestor had brought God's disfavor upon him. The rich man may have said to himself, I'm certainly glad I'm not him. My bloodline is pure and blameless. Look at my blessings. But this is where the parable takes an unexpected turn. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. He had a different destination. In Hades, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. As far as we know, Lazarus was not even buried. Just as men carried him to beg, angels carried him to paradise. But the rich man, who may have had the best funeral that money could buy, ended up tormented in the unseen world of the dead. Someone in that day, or even this day, might believe the rich man was destined for better things. When the rich man realized his situation, he looked up to where Abraham cradled Lazarus and called, Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire. Abraham's reply was quick and to the point. Son, remember that in your lifetime you received your good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you a great chasm has been set in place, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us. The rich man then asked for another thing, if Lazarus could not provide relief. I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my family, for I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment. Abraham replies, they have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them. The rich man then says, if someone is sent from the dead to my brothers, they will indeed repent. Father Abraham knows better. If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not even be convinced if someone rises from the dead to aid them. Why did the rich man end in the place of torment? His money had no sway in this case. His position in the community, while impressive when he lived, could not keep him from terrible punishment. We are not told that he was a bad man, vicious or wicked, yet could his downfall be due to the indifference he showed to Lazarus the beggar? There, right at his home entrance, was one of God's children in need. He could have used his wealth and position to help this unfortunate man at his door, but he did not. Also, he was selfish. He did not spare any pleasure for himself. Yet there was someone needy outside his palace. The rich man allowed his pleasures to control him. His selfish life sealed his fate. The rich man also failed to pay attention to the written word. When Abraham said his brothers do not need Lazarus to warn them, they have Moses and the prophets, the rich man said, no, that is not enough. He lessened the value of the holy word. He wanted more than what was written by God. Jesus, in this parable, gives us a glimpse into the hereafter. The rich man, while he had all worldly goods, squandered them. He did not make plans for his soul. His money and his lavish lifestyle did not follow him past the grave. In the end, the rich man was taken to the world of torment because of his unbelief. His destiny was determined and sealed by his inconsiderate actions while alive. Are you rich? Most of us would say no. We see people who have more than we have, and we call them rich. But have you considered that people who have less than we have may see us as rich? The point of the parable is not to condemn the rich and to glorify beggars. The point is to make us realize that God's approval cannot be measured by a person's wealth. We honor him, and he will honor us when we use the little or much he gives us to help others, to help those like Lazarus, that he places right in front of us. This has been the Parables, stories from the heart of Christ to explain God's desire for those in his kingdom. I'm John Erie.
is my wife, Juliet.
We welcome you to Fast to a Happy Home, a program designed to strengthen marriages and improve family relationships.
Now, here's today's lesson presented by Hilton and Janet Allison.
We're talking again about sex and marriage. God has made sex. He intended it to be a good thing. It wasn't something that people dreamed up that they needed to have together. God made it. But He made it for a special purpose. He made it for the enjoyment of a husband and wife together, and He made it also to have children. These are special reasons for having a sexual relationship. And God expects us to have our sexual relationship only in marriage. When we go out of what God intended for marriage and have sex in other ways, whether it be with other women or other men or with animals or even pornography and other such things, we're doing wrong, and we need to guard ourselves. There are several scriptures in the Bible that talk about this. There's one in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 9 and 10, where 4 different sexual relationships are mentioned as sin. And then there's other passages. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 talks about how in Israel many people were killed because of sexual immorality. First is a sustainer of a marriage. When we threaten each other by going out and having sex in other ways, we break trust, and we break our relationship, and we sin against God.
Yes, this is a very important thing to remember in our marriage. And I think it's also noteworthy to realize that it's not only the women who are told to be faithful, but the men also. Sometimes men get the idea that if their wife has sex outside the marriage, then he can chase her away and she's very bad. But if he has sex outside the relationship, well, that's okay. That's his right. But it isn't. He doesn't have the right to go outside of their marriage either. This rule applies to both husband and wife. And we need to be faithful to one another. And the husband needs to honor his wife in that way. And God himself.
I had an elder of a church come to me one time and said that his wife had reached the age of menopause. And so he said she no longer will have sex with me because she has reached this age. This was a custom practice among these people. And he said, what shall I do? Shall I sleep with a prostitute? Or shall I marry a second wife? He said, I can't do that. I'm a Christian. I don't want to do that. I want to honor God in my marriage. But you see, there's a problem when sex is refused in marriage. It causes temptation and problems. Both husbands and wives need to guard each other and give to each other freely sex as God intended it. And when we do this in our marriages, it helps us be pure and holy before one another and before God.
Very good point, Fielding. The sexual relationship doesn't just suddenly end when a woman reaches menopause. She's still a sexual person, and so is her husband. He has needs just like he did before. And so she needs to give him what he needs in that way. And amazingly, a woman, even though she doesn't have as strong a desire after menopause, she can have just as much pleasure. If she's learned to have pleasure with her husband regularly before, then she can continue that even after menopause. The thing is, both husband and wife have less desire for sex as they get older, and so it's not something that they're going to want to do every day anymore, or maybe even more than once a week, or even less often than that. But they can find a rhythm that's good for both of them and continue to enjoy this part of their relationship right into old age.
God intended us to have a good sexual relationship. We can do that.
You have been listening to Path to a Happy Home, a production of African Institute of Marriage and Family, AIMF. The speakers have been Hilden and Janet Harrison, who have lived and worked in Africa since 1972. God has blessed them with a successful marriage and 5 children.
Since 1984, they have been teaching God's way to develop healthy marriages and strong families. They conduct marriage and family seminars throughout Africa and teach at African Christian College in Swaziland. You may contact them by writing aimfradio@gmail.com or by visiting www.africanpathways.org.
It happens because we live, work, and play around other people. It is conflict. In America, researchers say people average 5 conflicts a day. Our series is titled Living with Conflict. Here's Greg Taylor.